A good number of listeners of this show work with computers, of course, and many are likely in an IT role as well. And so I always try to highlight some recommended technology to help you better get your work done. You, of course, know about Intel, probably powers the computer that you use personally, but we're now going to chat about professionally using Intel. We're going to get a primer on Intel vPro and Intel vPro Enterprise. We're joined by Eric Chong, Enterprise Client Technical Sales Specialist at Intel, who has more than 25 years of experience, by the way, in the IT space, and he's authored 2 books as well. Welcome to the show, Eric. Good to chat with you.
Great. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Sure. I'm excited about this topic because I don't know that much about vPro. Of course, I'm a big fan of Intel, so I'm looking forward to this. Now, before we talk about Intel vPro for Business, Intel recently celebrated the 50th birthday of the first commercially produced computer chip. I think it was back in 1971. And, funny, the company is still innovating half a century later. Let's just remind everyone what the role of the processor is, or the CPU, and Intel's role in the industry.
Sure, Mark. Yeah, the CPU is the brains behind the PC. Namely, it executes the instructions that make that PC run. Over the years, the scope has changed. So it included things such as integrated graphics in the CPU. And in 2007, Intel came out with the vPro branding, which included baseline components in the PC, not just the CPU itself.
Okay, so it's all connected. And when you're talking about integrated graphics, that's where typically you would need a separate graphics card to, render those images on screen for if you're a gamer or an animator or anything like that. But now a lot of that heavy lifting is done by Intel without needing a separate card, which is great. And I always say, when people say to me, Eric, and I'm sure you as well, hey, I'm buying a laptop. What should I look for? What brand should I, or what screen size? I always say you're missing one of the most important decisions, and that's the processor. That, as you said, the brains of the PC, or I call it the engine that drives the computer's performance.
You're absolutely correct.
All right. So let's now chat Intel vPro. At a high level, what's it all about?
Yeah, when I talk about vPro, I talk about it as a platform. Specifically, you need harder ingredients to make up the vPro platform. In other words, you need the vPro-based CPU, vPro chipset, and the vPro networking. So basically, when you have all those components together, you'll see a sticker on the device that will say Core i5 or Core i7, and hopefully the words vPro right below it. That means that device is platformed. Now, when it's platformed, Intel has a mantra called vPro is built for business, meaning that it's the best technology for business.
All right. And thanks for bringing up the Core family, by the way. I always say that the Core i3, Core i5, Core i7 sticker that you may see, or badge that you may see on a laptop, is kind of like a good, better, best scenario. The higher the number, generally speaking, the higher the performance. There's also a Core i9 if you're a gamer, but we're talking specifically today about vPro. So when you see that little badge, that means it's been verified to be a powerful device for business's sake. With that in mind, what separates vPro from a regular, let's say, 12th gen Intel Core processor?
So there's 4 main pillars that vPro is predicated on: performance, stability, security, and manageability. So let me give you an example of how manageability is used in the real world. So one of the customers I cover is actually a school board, and it's in a very rural area. And as such, I believe, if I remember correctly, the schools at a minimum are 2 hours apart. And from end to end of this particular province, they're actually, I think, 8 hours away. And they have no IT staff at each school. So when they run into particular issues, they just can't send somebody there because it's a 2-hour drive to fix a 10-minute issue. So they use the active management technology to get into that particular PC, remediate it, no truck roll, and essentially you're saving 4 to 16 hours of just driving time to get to that particular PC. I'll give you another example. A lot of times, where people there's vPro around them, they don't even know it. So for example, a lot of digital signage has PCs behind the actual 50-inch display you'll see at a restaurant, for example. But how do you actually manage that PC? Something goes wrong with it. How do you reboot it? You can't just get a ladder and walk up to it and press that button. It's not very accessible. It could be even locked behind a kiosk somewhere. So with active management technology, again, you can get to those devices that aren't readily accessible. For security specifically, there's a lot of technology built in that you may not even know it's actually working on your behalf. So without sounding too technical, there is something called threat detection technology. And a lot of actual products, including Microsoft Defender, which comes with your actual operating system natively, actually utilizes this to detect threats against crypto mining and ransomware on the newest generation PCs.
Interesting. I'm going to ask you more about this active management technology in a moment. You also hinted at vPro Enterprise, a sister platform, if you will. But we are chatting with Eric Chong. He's Enterprise Client Technical Sales Specialist at Intel. We are learning about vPro, Intel vPro for Business, as well as Intel vPro Enterprise. So let's dive down a little bit more, if you can, in plain English, about the security related features like Intel Hardware Shield?
Yeah, Intel Hardware Shield really is the overarching client security narrative beginning at the silicon level. So we have this in all core-based CPUs. There are, again, as I mentioned earlier, there are specific features only found on vPro platform devices. But the way Intel looks at Hardware Shield is three different layers, starting at the silicon. One is below the OS security, meaning that even before the operating system loads up, you're secure. The other layer is at the application OS layer, meaning that's what we normally use or see with the antivirus protections of days past, but there's a lot more now to it.
Because there's a lot more threats, yeah.
Absolutely. And at the higher level, we have something called advanced threat detection. So we can kind of predict things that are going to happen, such as ransomware, crypto mining. So those are the three basic layers of hardware shield: below the OS, at the application layer, at the very top, the advanced threat detection.
All right, thanks for that. Yeah, I know it's like a stacked approach. And at the risk of getting too geeky here, Eric, what is Intel Active Management Technology all about? You did sort of touch on this already. Intel AMT.
Yeah, Intel Active Management Technology has been around for 15 years, and it's obviously been progressively had more features built into it. But very high level, it's out of band management, which means that that PC can be in any state, and you can remote into that machine, whether it's powering it on, remote controlling it. So if you think of the server side, you think of servers, they're in a data center usually, and how do you get to that server? And I'll use some industry terms, iDRAC, ILO. These are the mechanisms to get to that server from our various partners at Dell and HP, for example, that allow you to manage that machine. So think of that same kind of methodology, but on a client machine. And what this does, it allows for very fast problem remediation and even avoiding issues as well. So we talked about security just a few seconds ago. You can get higher patch saturation by remotely powering on these devices through the active management technology, because as we know, we can't patch a machine that's turned off. So we give the use the IT folks to power on that machine so that machine can be actually patched.
All right, so this means in plain English that someone remotely can access that device, even if it's powered off, in order to fix any issues or to upgrade it, if you need to upgrade the software or add new applications, that kind of thing. Is that right?
That's correct. And I'll add on one additional piece, not just anybody, but a trusted person.
Of course,
so what happens is that the machine has to be to a trusted person. So I just can't go in and start hacking away at your machine, Mark. It has to be provisioned in such a manner that it only trusts my particular, it's called a console. And the beautiful thing about this as well is that it can be done over the internet. For example, if you're working at a Starbucks and your machine has been what we call AMT activated or active management technology activated, I can do that same support even if you're working at a Starbucks.
Very cool. So what industries would you say, Eric, best benefit from Intel vPro? Any verticals, if you will? Is it like healthcare, fintech? What are some of these spaces that you're seeing this adoption of vPro and vPro Enterprise?
Yeah, historically, large enterprise and public sector buy vPro. But most recently, we've seen a large uptake in the small to medium business and the very small business as well buying vPro, primarily because of the security features and manageability features inherent in them.
And that's because of the pandemic, you'd say?
A lot of it, yes. A lot of customers, because people are working from home, how do you actually manage the machines? Traditionally on site, now they're off site. How do you get to those machines with the same level of service on those devices now that they're out of your environment? And a lot of that can be achieved through active management technology.
All right. So again, it goes back to that AMT feature, which is part of Intel vPro. And before we wrap up, let's talk Intel vPro Enterprise. So obviously Enterprise are larger companies. So what would be different from the regular vPro platform?
Yeah, so the vPro branding begun in 2007. Now, recently with the 12th generation products, we call that vPro, I call it vPro Legacy now, is now known as vPro Enterprise. We've actually added additional tiers for vPro. So now with the 12th generation products, we now have vPro Essentials, which is geared towards the small to medium business. We've also added another tier called vPro Enterprise for Chrome, which is basically the vPro Enterprise you know and love, but now actually available on Chrome devices.
Chrome, of course, an increasingly popular operating system from Google, which is great. Is there a place that our listeners can go to for more on both of these platforms?
The best spot is intel.ca/IT Heroes, ITHEROES. And they talk about the 4 pillars of vPro, which are, think of them as superpowers for the IT administrators, because now IT administrators have a lot tougher job to manage PCs in terms of security and manageability. And this will ease that particular burden.
Yeah, love that. IT Heroes. That's great because they are. All right, so intel.ca/IT Heroes to learn more about Intel vPro and Intel vPro Enterprise. All right, Eric. Eric Chong has been our guest. Great to chat with you. Thank you for your time and your expertise, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.